Hello everyone. This is the first week of March, and this has been very much eventful as far as international relations, current affairs is concerned. It has been eventful, interesting, but at the same time dangerous. We all know that on 28th of February, Israel and US launched attacks on Iran, in which the Iranian supreme leader Ayatollah Khomeini was killed. Right. There have been different other developments as well. In the first lecture that we have, as far as this month is concerned, I would be discussing different developments which happened, which were important to the perspective of UPSC, MPSC, and civil service examinations. Let's go through the developments first. In the next lecture, I would talk about special case studies like the war that is going on right now, right? So I would just give an overview. These are the three topics which I am going to discuss in three different lectures. So today we would discuss important developments as far as IR is concerned, right? Uh, in the next lecture, I would talk about US Israel Iran war. That would be a special lecture. And the second special lecture would be regarding India Canada SEPA. So these are three important themes of this week. Let us begin with the important developments first. And before I begin, I must tell you that after lectures, I would be uploading this document, which will be downloadable for all of you. Right? You can get the content, and the document also consists of probable questions, practice questions, along with model answers. So you can use those questions, write your answers, and compare with model answers. Let us begin with important developments of this week, 1st to 7th March, 2026. The key themes of this week you can see on the screen. First, escalation of Iran West Asia conflict that began on 28th of February. Second, multipolar world order debate. This debate generated particularly in India because of the statement given by Minister of External Affairs S. Jaishankar. Third theme, US South Korea joint military drills. We have to understand that what is happening in West Asia is not an isolated event. It is linked to different other events like Ukraine war that was going on, right? It is still going on. The removal of Assad regime from Syria, Israel Hamas conflict, Israel Iran conflict, and then US Israel Iran conflict. All these things are connected. But the theater of all these events happens to be Middle East and Eastern Europe. But these things are also linked to what is called Indo-Pacific. And this is one interesting development that we see in Indo-Pacific. We will discuss that as well briefly. Another important development that we see is Raisina dialogue that the government of India, Minister of External Affairs particularly, along with a think tank called ORF Online, Observer Research Foundation, they hold it. Let's go through what have been different important themes as far as Raisina dialogue 2026 is concerned. Next theme is 7th Joint Committee meeting of India Japan SEPA. I would discuss what has happened in this meeting as well. Let's begin with the first topic, escalation of the Iran West Asia conflict. I have kept it brief here because we are going through important developments of the week. I would have a dedicated session, dedicated lecture on this topic. That would be the next lecture. What are the trigger point? Joint US Israel military strikes on Iran. That was the trigger point, which was called Operation Epic Fury. And I have mentioned it here. There's a special topic in the PDF. You can refer to that later for the details, right? Targeting military and nuclear infrastructure of Iran. It was joint operation by US and Israel. Iran retaliated with missile and drone attacks in the Gulf region. I am just keeping that detailed analysis parked right now because I would deal with that in the special topic as to why Iran attacked Gulf region, whereas Israel and US were attacking Iran. Iran has obviously attacked Israel as well and important US bases in the Gulf region. We would discuss that in detail in the next lecture. Gulf countries, international actors called for de-escalation and diplomacy. Obviously, nobody wants war, nobody wants inflationary pressures, nobody wants oil crisis, right? So most of the countries talked about de-escalation of the conflict and resolving the conflict through diplomacy. Now this was a trigger point. Let's look at the consequences briefly, right? What were the consequences of this development? Iranian drone attack reportedly targeted regional infrastructure, including Bahrain airport. Iran's strategy has been very interesting. They are targeting infra in terms of airports, in terms of ports, right? Infrastructural kind of points in order to create pressure. That is one consequence. Second, rising tensions created wider regional crisis affecting West Asia and global energy markets. Obviously, entire West Asia is disturbed now, right? Regional instability, that is one, leading to crisis. Second, global energy markets are disrupted like anything. Some analysts suggest Russia may benefit economically due to rising oil prices because Russia has been an important player, largest natural gas supplier, having oil reserves as well, right? And there has been pressure on Russia, sanctions, US sanctions. So they get some respite. We would again discuss these things in detail, how US has eased sanctions on Russia and how Russia is gaining economically. Threat to global energy supply and shipping lanes, and particularly that Hormuz region, where uh, around 80%, 20% of the entire energy flow goes through Hormuz Strait. So this is threatening global shipping in general. In particular, there has been oil price volatility that all of us are observing now. Price spiked due to disruptions in Saudi Aramco's Ras Tanura refinery and Iraq's Rumaila oil field. So these are two important, I would say, oil fields, refineries, which send their exports through Hormuz Strait. That has been now disrupted by Iran. Wider geopolitical instability. So what has been now seen is Israel, US versus Iran, and Iran versus other Gulf countries. So entire region has been pushed into instability, military, political instability. 50 to 15 to 20% surge in freight and insurance costs. This has been also one of the economic consequences of the war. Increased risk of proxy wars across Middle East. This is sort of long-term kind of consequence that we may see, right, in future, because whenever there is asymmetric war, one powerful country versus other middle power, or less powerful country, the less powerful middle power generally resorts to proxy wars. So there would be some kind of possibility of proxy wars going forward. Possible restructuring of regional security alliances. There have been lots of developments in Middle East in last few months. Assad regime was overthrown, and Assad was an ally of Iran. Iran had entry point through Assad regime in Levant region, right? So all these things are now disturbed. So what would be the new equations, regional and global, based on the developments in West Asia, is something that we are supposed to look forward to. This is what has happened in brief. I would discuss this in detail in the next lecture. What was India's response, policy response to what is happening in West Asia? So India's diplomatic balancing, something that India has always been doing. As a middle power, we go for balancing different countries. Number one. Number two, India has got stakes in almost every country. We have friendship with most of the countries which are in conflict right now. You can see it here. So Iran crisis placed India in strategic dilemma. No doubt about that, right? It's a riddle, because we maintain relations with most of the countries which are right now in the conflict. So we maintain relations with Iran, we maintain relations with Israel, very close relations rather, other Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, for example, United States as well. So these are all important partners for India as far as foreign policy is concerned. But these countries are now at war with each other. So what kind of side are we supposed to take? Because on both sides we have friends. That puts India into a dilemma, strategic dilemma. So, how India responded to the strategic dilemma? India urged restraint and dialogue among all. This has been India's policy response in case of most of the crisis, right? We talk about restraint, de-escalation, and dialogue to resolve the conflict. Focus on safety of civilians and regional stability. So, India focuses on its own national interest. As far as West Asia is concerned, we do not meddle into the regional conflict, regional balance of power, regional power equations. We do not enter into it because on both sides we have friends, and on both sides we have benefits. That's why we focus more on our immediate national concerns, interest, and we call for restraint and dialogue. So, what are India's stakes in the region? We all know, but just to summarize it, one, energy imports, very important component, right? 50% of India's imported oil comes through Strait of Hormuz, that is in the middle of conflict right now. That is the geopolitical center of West Asian conflict, right? Iran has been bombarding that entire region, and shipping through that strait has become very risky, and that's why insurance cost has also increased a lot. So all these things put India into trouble in terms of inflationary pressure, oil price increase in particular, and that has got ripple effects on other commodities as well. So in general, inflation. Second important stake that we have is large Indian diaspora. Not to forget that Middle East is one of the regions where Indian diaspora has got immense presence. The largest diaspora of India resides in UAE, United Arab Emirates, right? Trade and connectivity projects, we all know that IRNSTC, no, not IRNSTC, just pardon me, it's India's regional uh, international north south international north south transport corridor, international north south transport corridor that connects Mumbai to Chaba Airport, and then to Zahedan, that's one place in Iran, and that connects us to Central Asia, from there on to Moscow, and from there on to Europe. It's an important connectivity project for us. So Chaba Airport becomes very important. Iran at war brings that entire project into trouble. Then, obviously, one important concern has been maritime security, right? Overall maritime security in terms of uh, the shipping links that we have through the Strait of Hormuz. What is the foreign policy challenge for India? India must balance US-Israel strategic ties. Over last few years, India's strategic ties depth has increased a lot with US and Israel both on one hand, energy connectivity interest in Iran on the other hand. So we cannot take sides, we cannot afford to take sides. Both these things are very important. That's why India must balance these two. And that's a challenge. US waiver for India to buy Russian oil, that has been a respite, that has been a concession that we got from US. United States granted India a 30-day waiver to continue purchasing Russian crude oil that had come under scanner. And this was one reason as to why US slapped uh, uh, additional 25% tariffs on India. Now that has been sort of withdrawn, right? Reflects strategic flexibility in India-US relations. So India-US relations are multi-layered, deeper kind of relations, mature kind of relations. And because of this, whenever there's some kind of crisis and India is not taking any kind of side, not of US as well, despite that, because of depth of relation, we get such kind of concessions. That shows the strategic flexibility arising out of the maturity of the relation. Shows the importance of India in global energy stability. India is an important economy, fourth largest economy, arguably, and if that economy comes in trouble, entire world economy may come in trouble. And any economy survives on energy sources. So, in global energy stability, India's energy stability is also an important component. So, this is brief understanding of what has happened so far, how India has responded in terms of its own policy response. That was the most important development as far as this week is concerned. I would conduct a separate lecture in detail, bringing in views of different scholars on that topic, right? That would be useful for GSR as well as those who are having PSIR as an option in paper two. Second important development, briefly, that debate has been there since long, but triggered again by India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. He gave a statement: "The era of global hegemony is over." The kind of uh, developments that which unfolded out of the crisis that we are seeing in West Asia, many scholars, many observers, analysts are saying that that's an indication of relative decline of US power. We are heading more and more towards multipolarity from what has been called US unipolarity ever since end of Cold War. So that is a statement that Jaishankar gave. The key idea out of that statement is power is now distributed across multiple regions and actors, giving rise to a multipolar world order. That's a key idea, right? You may attend question on this in different ways. What are the implications for IR as far as multipolar world order is concerned? So one is rise of multipolarity itself, and that may lead to increasing instability, according to John Mershimer's offensive realist theory. Uh, GSI students, just pardon me for a moment because I need to point out this to PSI students that they can take the name of John Mershimer. He talked about how multipolarity is much more unstable, brings more instability as compared to bipolar world, right? And Mershimer's analysis was an extension of Kenneth Wald's analysis. Both were structural realist, right? That's enough for PSI students to get some trigger point as far as application of theory to IR is concerned. So greater role for middle powers like India. And by the way, those who are here for GSIR, you can just point out this point. Increasing instability comes along with multipolarity because of a simple reason. When there are two great powers, right, P1, P2, there are lesser fingers on the trigger, and they can keep check on each other. When there are multiple powers, there is a chance of miscalculation, right? That's why conflicts may become more frequent in multipolar world. Or that's enough for GSIR. Greater role for middle powers like India. Whenever there is multipolar world order, greater role is there for middle powers. India, you can say Brazil, South Africa, right? Different middle powers may play greater role, and that's why Shankar gave a potent statement, sort of giving an indication that India may have greater role in coming years. Shift from unipolar US dominance. These are the consequences that we are observing, right? Because of the conflicts. Opportunities as well as challenges for India. The upcoming new world order that we are witnessing, which our honorable MEA rightly pointed out, there would be opportunities as well as challenges. Let's go through it briefly. First, challenge of balancing and tight rope walk. Because we are a middle power, we cannot afford to take sides, and people on both sides, countries on both sides, offer a lots of benefits to India. So this opportunity cost the moment we choose one, and we cannot afford to lose that value that comes with both of them, right? And that's why balancing becomes tough whenever there is multipolarity and conflict. That's one challenge, and that would be a tight rope walk. You have to keep on engaging both the countries in conflict with deeper kind of diplomatic engagement, and the diplomatic skills are tested in such kind of situations. That is why it is called tightrope walk. One example is this, balancing US and Russia. Other example will be balancing US and Iran, balancing Israel and Iran, right? Challenges due to implications of conflicts, because we are observing number of conflicts now, and multipolarity brings conflicts. There are implications and we have to deal with that. One is this one, energy and connectivity in West Asia amidst current conflict. Both the aspects are in trouble, and we have to really deal with this challenge as well. And we are doing that. How we are doing that, we would discuss that separately. I would conduct a lecture. Let some events get unfolded. I would conduct a lecture that would sort of summarize India's foreign policy, analytically speaking, how we are dealing with all these challenges analytically, right? In a separate lecture at the month end, right? Opportunity to shape world order according to India's own vision of new world order that envisions multipolar, multilateral, rules-based order. Please try to understand this. India has its own vision for new world order, and we have been looking forward to an opportunity to shape it. For most of the time, we had been rule taker, right? Now we want to be rule shaper. So we want to shape the world as per our vision. And what is our vision? These are the important points. We want a multipolar world. We don't want a unipolar world where there's hegemony of one single country. We want multilateral forums to flourish rather than plurilateral. Plurilateral forums are those where small number of countries, powerful countries come together and they want to govern the world. For example, G7 is plurilateral forum that deals with economic governance of the world in a sense, right? But we support economic governance of the world through WTO, that is a multipolar world, multipolar platform. Sorry, multilateral platform. Multilateral platforms are ones where most of the countries are members. So we prefer this one, right? Then rules-based world order. What we are observing right now, we observed hegemonic kind of world order, then we are observing some kind of multipolar world order. There is an opportunity now to shape a world order based on rules. So India can contribute to that as well. Another PSR dimension here is um, when a country looks forward to shape the world order, that approach is called complex neo-realist approach. Complex neo-realist approach. GS students can ignore this. Complex neo-realism involves reshaping the world order. You can coin this term. Next important development has been this one, US South Korea joint military drills. What is the event in news? Annual exercise Freedom Shield 2026, scheduled on 9th to 19th March upcoming, right? Between US and South Korea, right? Objective to strengthen military interoperability against North Korean threats. So this is one theater, Indo-Pacific, right? This is Eastern corridor of that, right? Pacific corridor, where you see the aggression on the part of North Korea. North Korea has been aggressive ever since it started developing nuclear weapons, right? And now North Korea is looking at the developments in a different way. They are saying that Donald Trump has been keen on regime change, right? Next in line could be North Korea, right? North Korea has become aggressive in a different manner by upgrading its own power internally. So, in order to keep a check on North Korea, this exercise, military exercise, was conducted. North Korea's reaction to this development. Strong rhetoric from Kim Jong Un. All of us know he is the leader, supreme leader, right? He gave a strong rhetorical kind of statement, right? Missile test and naval expansion plans. He clearly said that we would counter this by further missile test, and we would expand our naval strength, right? What is the significance of these developments? Heightened tensions on Korean Peninsula and reinforces U.S. alliance network in Indo-Pacific. So Korean Peninsula seems to experience tension, right? And US is trying to strengthen the alliance network in Indo-Pacific. I must tell you, everybody knows that, right? This is one platform in which US, India, Australia, and Japan are part. This is quadrilateral security dialogue forum, and US is trying to bring in other countries as well, like South Korea in Quad Plus. So they're trying to reinforce their alliance network in Indo-Pacific. This is important from our perspective, from our own foreign policy perspective, right? Rise in a Dialogue 2026. This gives us what is happening in the world in general and views of different experts. We'll go through it quickly. This is basic information. You can go through it. This is not to be discussed as such, factual information, which could be useful for the prelims. And if you add some data to your mains answer as well. Basic information. So on these days, Raisina Dialogue was held 5th to 7th March. Venue was New Delhi, India. This was 11th edition of Raisina Dialogue. Organizers, as I mentioned earlier, ORF in partnership with Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. ORF Observer Research Foundation is a think tank in foreign policy. Inaugurated by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President of Finland, Alexander Stubb. So this is how UPSC sometimes frames questions in prelims. Who inaugurated Raisina Dialogue 2026, right? So our Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President of Finland, Alexander Stubb. India's flagship conference on geopolitics and geoeconomy. What is Raisina Dialogue? It is this. It's a flagship conference on geopolitics and geoeconomics, which brings together global leaders, academicians, diplomats, policymakers, business leaders, all of them. This conference is often compared with the major global strategic forums like Munich Security Conference and Shangri-La Dialogue. India's own strategic forum, Raisina Dialogue, is based on these other strategic forums. We have to understand that increasingly in foreign policy, the role of think tanks and academic conferences has been increasing. Theme of this Raisina Dialogue, 11th edition, is this: Sanskar, assertion, accommodation, advancement. So this has been the theme. Let's understand the theme. Assertion. What does that mean? Countries asserting national interest in changing geopolitical order. We saw that. The global order is undergoing change. So countries have to assert their national interest in a situation that looks like a flux. That's why assertion. Second, accommodation. Need for cooperation, adjustment among competing powers. There has been intense competition among different powers in the world, and this competition should not lead to conflict. That is not in interest of anyone. That's why this competition should be based on accommodation of interest of different countries. That's why cooperation and adjustment with each other. Advancement, collective progress through technology, innovation, and governance reforms. So advancement in these areas: technology, innovation, and governance reforms. Every country wants advanced technology, every country wants to go for innovations, every country wants to improve governance. So collectively all can come together, discuss, brainstorm, and understand how we can bring advancement through collective progress in these fields. So the theme reflects transition toward a multipolar world, and that's what the statement of MEA was indicating, that we discussed short while ago, right? And need to balance national interest with global cooperation. That's the theme that we can clearly see here, right? What were the key issues discussed in this Raisina Dialogue of 2026 11th edition? First, fragmentation of the global order. That is one theme, running theme in this week that we are observing, and this would go on for some months to come. And that's why this would be current affairs for all of you for this year's mains and even for the next year, right? So fragmentation of global order, right? What has happened exactly? How this fragmentation came about? Decline of traditional Western dominance, We have witnessed Western dominance in 20th century. We witnessed in the closing decade of 20th century, that is 1990s. The first decade of 21st century was also sort of Western decade of Western dominance in terms of US dominance, particularly what happened post 9/11, uh, attack on Afghanistan, attack on Iraq, regime change. So complete US dominance, demonstration of US power. So now in last couple of decades, the last decade and the continuing decade, we are observing decline of traditional Western dominance. Second important element is rise of global south and middle powers. So this is also contributing to fragmentation of global order. Global order is getting fragmented to different power centers and to the regions. Third element, new geopolitical blocks and strategic competition. Quad is there, right? For example, then Western Quad is there, right? That IMEC is one important development that is happening in Western Quad, right? So different forums are coming up, different blocks are coming up, right? We are seeing apparent alliance between China and Russia, right? North Korea included, Iran included, right? So strategic competition can also be seen. All these elements are contributing to fragmentation of global order. That was one key issue discussed in Rajana dialogue. Second, very important, artificial intelligence and emerging technologies. This is one development that is going to bring a lot of disruption in coming months, years. Artificial intelligence and emerging technologies. So governance of AI and digital technologies would be a major issue. I would request all of you to gather as much information as possible as far as IR is concerned, because many things are governed at the international level. At some point of time, countries will come together. They would try to understand what kind of disruption AI is bringing for all the countries, and they would try to govern it. Govern means to control it, to regulate it, right? And even new digital technologies. Second, ethical regulatory frameworks for AI. AI is generating lot of ethical questions: privacy, misuse, defamation, fabricated videos, a number of other things, right? So all these things are to be regulated, and that becomes part of the governance, right? Cyber security, digital sovereignty. These are two important topics. Cyber security, everybody knows that. I talked about this in this point as well. Your personal data, your privacy, misuse of information, forged videos, right? That comes under cyber security. And digital sovereignty, very important, because every country has got digital repository, and many a times what happens is many companies, multinational companies, they generate digital information data of a country, and that becomes their data. And particularly the global south countries like India have been talking about digital sovereignty or data sovereignty. That is one important aspect of global governance of IT in general and AI in particular. AI and technology governance were among central topics discussed by global policymakers. There has been discussion going on this. Osaka summit, when Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was alive, in concluding part of his prime ministership, that summit was called, and he talked about data governance there. And India did not agree to it. We talked about data sovereignty, and we pointed to data colonialism. So all these important topics: data colonialism, data sovereignty, digital sovereignty, are important aspects of India's policy towards emerging technologies, digital world in general. Right. Third theme of regional dialogue was global security and conflicts, ongoing kind of topic, right? So ongoing geopolitical tensions are witnessed, regional conflicts, security alliances, fluid security alliances which are changing every day, right? Regional conflicts like what we observe in terms of Israel, Lebanon, that is going on right now, Israel, Hamas earlier, Ukraine war, US, Israel, Iran war. So all these things are discussed here. Maritime security, which has become very important, and Indo-Pacific strategy, right? So these were important topics under global security and conflicts. Economic security and supply chain. Supply chain has become very crucial topic right now, right? Resilient supply chain. This is one topic that has been discussed ever since COVID pandemic literally disrupted everything. Supply chains came in trouble, in real trouble. So supplies were late and we're not getting anything, right? In time, and the cost increased, and entire uh, uh, value chain was impacted. That's why ever since that China lockdown happened and it impacted global supply chains, there has been talk about resilient supply chains which can withstand such kind of crisis. And now another crisis we are seeing in terms of energy supplies. So again, that topics comes in. Critical minerals, technological competition. This is very important. Critical minerals is one topic Donald Trump has been picking up when he claims different regions, including uh, uh, Venezuela, Greenland, right? And there's a tech competition, cutthroat tech competition. You can talk about different AI models prepared by US companies, and then DeepSeek by China. That is one indicator of tech competition that we're observing in the world today. Global trade realignments. Lots of things are changing. For example, India-EU trade deal has happened. We will talk about that as well briefly somewhere. So EU is looking forward to establish all the feasible kind of supply chains with India, because China has not been that reliable. That is what they are thinking now, at least. But they have even today a lot of reliance on China in terms of supply. Australia is also thinking to diversify supply chains away from China. So is Japan. So that is one area, global trade realignments, right? Then this is one very serious matter that world is facing, and that was discussed in Rise in a Dialogue: climate change and sustainable development. We are literally in red zone, according to the sixth assessment report, uh, 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 which has clearly mentioned that we are in trouble. And UN Secretary General clearly said this is code red. The sixth assessment report of IPCC is a code red for the humanity. So we are in trouble. So green transition is to be understood in terms of reducing uh, greenhouse gas emissions. Climate finance is very important, because developing countries don't have enough finance to bring green technologies, to develop them and to implement, right? Then energy security in general. If we go away from fossil fuels, polluting fuels, what are the alternatives? So these are three important themes that were discussed in Rise in a Dialogue. So we talked about key themes and issues discussed in Rise in a Dialogue. Now, some initiatives. Raijana Science Diplomacy Initiative was launched here. So new initiative organized alongside the dialogue, right? What is the objective of this? To focus on science, technology, and global cooperation. Science tech and the kind of tech competition that we are observing, how to bring that adjustment theme, right? That accommodation theme. So global cooperation on science and tech promotes collaboration in innovation and emerging technologies. Collaboration. You can look at the theme again, once again. This theme is very important. There is competition, no doubt about that, right? Competing powers are there, but we must look for collective progress. We must accommodate each other, right? We must uh, uh, accommodate each other, right? That is very important, and that's why this theme can be seen here in the Science Diplomacy Initiative Rising Dialogue as well. What is the significance for India as far as Raijana Dialogue is concerned in general? Flagship diplomatic platform of India. We get lots of inputs, as in the Minister of External Affairs and government gets lots of inputs in terms of how the world is changing, what are the new challenges, what are the opportunities, what could be the policy options to face all this, right? Showcases India's role as bridge between global north and south. This is one important platform that we have created, and we, in a way, represent global south, and we invite leaders of global north as well. Finland president is one example, and we can create a bridge between global north and south. That's significance of Rise and Dialogue as a platform. Promotes India's strategic thinking on multipolar world order. So no doubt about that, we need platforms in order to shape the world order, and India always wanted multipolar world order. This could be one platform. Enhances India's soft power and thought leadership in global governance. Any kind of forum like this is a brainstorming forum where you bring in academicians, world leaders, um, policymakers, political leaders, and they brainstorm. They come up with different speeches, arguments, and discussions. That becomes a thought leadership. So you are generating a platform, you are leading the thought process, and it also enhances India's soft power. Let us now try to understand a little bit deeper analysis by these two scholars, Kabir Taneja and Sterling Paul. What all things have they highlighted as far as Rizona 2026 is concerned? They say that Rizona 2026 arrives at a moment of profound global churn. There is no doubt about that. Lots of things have been changing. Profound global churn can be seen, right? Power is dispersing even as rivalries intensify. On one hand, we are seeing that there is multipolarity, there is fragmentation of power that we discussed, and on the other hand, the rivalries are intensifying, which is the result of dispersion of power. That is what they point on. This is the global churn in which this dialogue has happened. Institutions built for different century strain under weight of new expectations. The global institutions that we have were shaped in 20th century, particularly in post-war period, from the middle of 20th century. And any institution that does not adapt to the changing situation, changing circumstances, becomes outdated. Indeed, it is true that the institutions are not yet outdated, but they are under strain because of the new developments, the global churn that we are witnessing. These two scholars have highlighted that. And in this context, regional dialogue has been conducted. Development competes with defense, climate urgency collides with political hesitation, technology races ahead of regulation. These are very important points. You can use this kind of content in the answers, right? What is the kind of dilemma that we are facing at the world level, at the foreign policy level, at the domestic level? Development competes with defense, right? We are trying to develop ourselves, but because of the conflicts, we have to spend on defense as well. More the defense spending, less development. That's the equation that we have, and that dilemma brings that dilemma comes to us because of the conflict situation that we are witnessing in multipolar world order. Climate urgency, very urgent topic, right? And that already is showing lots of symptoms of the frequent problems that humanity is facing, natural disasters and everything. So climate urgency collides with political hesitation. This is a difficult trade-off for any political leader. If you want to go for environmental conservation, economic development growth comes down, and no politician wants that because you have to show the economic results to the people in order to win the votes, and that's why there is general political hesitation as far as dealing with climate urgency is concerned. That's a dilemma that humanity is facing. And then technology races ahead of regulation. That's what we discussed. Technology comes and then governments are lagging behind in terms of regulating them. AI is disrupting right now, but there is no governance structure either domestically or internationally to govern such kind of emerging technologies. So technology races ahead of regulation, or regulation lags behind of technological race. Across theaters and terrains, from contested borders to contested bandwidth, the grammar of global order is being rewritten. You should use these kind of phrases in the answer, that would fetch more marks in GS as well as in PSR optional, right? These two scholars very succinctly have put what is happening right now. Contested borders, conflicts are going on between countries, and conflicts are going on between countries on the battleground as well as for the bandwidth, technological bandwidth. That's a very interesting kind of observation by these two scholars, and they say that grammar of global order is being rewritten, right? Rising publications. What were the publications of this year's Rising Dialogue? Six thematic pillars. First, contested frontiers. These two scholars have highlighted here. Contested frontiers, borders, diffusion of power, mutation of conflict, transformation of global commons into areas of competition. When you say global commons, and we have mentioned that here short while ago, climate change is one important aspect of it, right? So this is one area where there is conflict over global commons, right? So diffusion of power, we have been discussing that. Mutation of conflict is getting scattered, proxy wars and all that, and transformation of global commons into arenas of uh, competition. Repairing the commons is very important, right? Legacy institutions are faltering. Legacy institutions is something that I talked about short while ago. Institutions of previous century becoming strained, rather being strained in current century. So that institutional infrastructure needs some kind of uh, uh, restructuring, sort of reinventing itself, right? Legacy institutions are faltering right now. New groups, new guardians, new avenues. We talked about that. Number of new groups are coming up. Geopolitical groups, energy groups, they're competing with each other, right? So new coalitions, flexible plurilaterals. I have explained that short while ago. What is plurilateral? Emerging solidarities. All these things have been changing lots of things in the global landscape. Emerging solidarities, LGBTQ, right, is one example of emerging solidarity. Indigenous peoples movements in New Zealand, you can see that clearly, right? These are also new issues which are coming up. Crafting adaptive architectures for multipolarity. These are the problems that we are facing, and as I said while explaining this, the restructuring is needed, adaptation is needed as far as repairing the commons is concerned. With white whale, this is another theme, publication theme, right? Pursuit of agenda 2030. It is nothing but Rajana Dialogue published a sort of document on where are we in terms of SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, United Nations Development Environmental Program, sorry, and Development Program, UNDP, UNAP. ECOSOC have launched MDGs and SDGs. MDGs, the term of MDGs ended in 2015, and the term of SDGs is scheduled to end in 2030. And that's why, what is the progress that we have made so far that was dealt with in this report? Fourth publication was 11th hour. So obviously I have talked about that. Let's go through it quickly now. We are in 11th hour. We are in urgency in terms of climate change. So climate conflict, cost of delay, moral material urgency of climate action, and delay compounds both risk and inequity, right? Because if we stop development, many countries, many regions are quite poor, backward. How to really balance that out? We have to protect the environment as well as ensure development enough to take care of poverty, hunger, and different other problems. That's one area of concern. Tomorrowland is another published document. It talks about digital frontier, whether governance can keep pace with innovation, right? Whether humanity can still shape technologies that increasingly shape it. So, keeping pace with innovation and technology, pace of governance with these topics, I have mentioned that. That's why I'm going through briefly. Trade in time of tariffs. Tariff war is going on literally, right? So, recovery, resilience, reinvention. These three themes have been pointed out. Resilience forged through reinvention, reconfiguration of global commerce, and sovereignty interdependence ka coexistence uneasily. See, sovereignty and interdependence are existing, coexisting uneasily. Everybody's interdependent. Everybody knows that we have to import certain things. Value chains are there which are global. We are dependent on different countries. For example, India and China, they fight on the question of sovereignty. Doklam crisis, Galwan crisis, but they coexist in terms of interdependence. Both their economies are quite interdependent, and that there is uneasy kind of coexistence. That is one important publication that highlights this, right? Next topic is seventh joint committee meeting of India Japan SEPA, right? Let us talk about that. Conducted on 2nd March 2026 at Tokyo, Japan. Objective periodic review of implementation effectiveness of SEPA and to discuss ways to deepen bilateral economic cooperation. This is the objective. SEPA is there in existence already. Periodic review was the objective of this meeting. What has been implemented so far? How effective SEPA had been so far, and how we can deepen the bilateral economic relations further. Key issues discussed: review of implementation of SEPA. The Joint Committee reviewed operation implementation of SEPA, which has been in force since 2011. So India Japan signed SEPA in 2011, and that has been reviewed here, right? Discussion focused on improving utilization of the agreement and resolving operational challenges. So one is how to utilize existing agreement to the fullest, to their potential, right? Second, if there are any kind of challenges in operationalizing agreements, right? That was also discussed, right? Second, enhancing bilateral trade and investment. It has been mentioned here. So we have to go beyond what has been achieved now. So that is second thing, enhancing bilateral trade and investment. Both sides emphasize need to strengthen, diversify bilateral trade and investment flows. We have to understand this. Japan has been an important economic partner of India, both in terms of bilateral trade and investment. We attract a lot of investment from Japan, and that's why both want to strengthen these two aspects, trade and investment. The meeting reiterated economic pillar of India Japan's spatial strategic global partnership. So, India Japan spatial strategic and global partnership. Though the meeting was about economy, these two important aspects were also highlighted. Strategic convergence is there between these two countries as far as Indo-Pacific is concerned, as far as countering Chinese hegemony in this region is concerned. Second, these two come together on global platforms to counter Chinese hegemony, right? To bring rules-based order and number of other things. For example, Asia Africa Growth Corridor is a joint venture of India and Japan. Addressing trade imbalance, India suffers current account deficit in its trade with Japan. That's why India highlighted need to rebalance bilateral trade as India runs significant trade deficit with Japan. Discussions explored improving market access for Indian products in Japan. If the market access increases, India's export increases, we earn more, and that may reduce the deficit. That's why this point was pointed out. Market access and trade facilitation. Discussion happened on these topics. Removal of non-tariff barriers. What are non-tariff barriers? You know that very well. Like quotas, subsidies, sensitive list, blacklist, etc. Simplifying customs procedures, regulatory framework. That is another topic discussed. Improving rules of origin compliance. Right. better utilization of tariff concessions under SEPA. These were topics discussed for improved market access and facilitating more trade. Then sectoral opportunities were identified in this meeting. What are the opportunities for these two countries to enhance their both trade and investment? These are the areas: textiles, pharmaceuticals, agriculture, services, and advanced technologies in manufacturing. Strategic and economic significance of this meeting. SEPA is a major framework governing India-Japan economic relations since 2011. Right? Meeting took place amid efforts to. Now this tells us the significance to strengthen supply chain resilience in Indo-Pacific. Now, I should not be required to again explain why supply chain resilience has become important since COVID-19 pandemic. I have explained that. That's why I'm going through briefly, right? So, supply chain resilience is one sensitive topic. Second, technological cooperation. I have explained this as well. There has been intense tech competition. And if we collaborate with countries like Japan, which have been technologically quite advanced, that could be beneficial to us. That is significance. Third, encourage Japanese investments in manufacturing and emerging sectors, electric vehicles, semiconductors, etc. We have to understand that Japan is very important from two perspectives. One, being a tech giant, technological giant, and being a country having huge investment potential. And these things can help India's manufacturing sector. India's service sector has been quite robust, but manufacturing has been lagging behind. And this is one area where Japan can help us. Key outcomes of this meeting: commitment to better utilization of SEPA by business in both countries. SEPA is there in place since 2011. It's more about using it to its full potential. That is one thing. Agreement to enhance diversified trade and investment relations. So through this meeting, we tried to do this. I have discussed this: trade and investment, how we can enhance as well as diversify, increase and diversify. Diversify in the sense covering more and more sectors. Continued discussions to reduce trade imbalances. I pointed out that as well. This is a kind of summary. We suffer CAT, and that's why we talk about improving trade balance and improve the market access. This could improve trade balance. Strengthening institutional dialogue under SEPA framework for future economic cooperation. SEPA framework is to be strengthened. That is one aspect of the meeting we highlighted. This is another topic: India EU FTA. Follow up discussions continued after historic conclusion of India EU free trade agreement negotiations. This pact is expected to provide India preferential access to 97% of EU tariff lanes. I would conduct a separate lecture on this, right? India EU FTA. Other developments: UN Human Rights Council 61st regular session continued in Geneva. Factual information examining human rights situation in Afghanistan, Sudan, man. You should know these things. Sometimes questions come in prelims. Disarmament Day, March 5. UN observed International Day for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation of WMDs, weapons of mass destruction. Marking 56th anniversary of NPT's entry into force. Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, implemented in 1968, right? 1968. So 56th anniversary, and then Disarmament Day was declared here, right? So this is what I want to discuss in terms of developments in this week. I need to tell you, emphasize that this lecture was a little bit lengthy because there were lots of developments to cover in this week. Sometimes there are less developments, so we may have shorter kind of lectures. I know students have preference for shorter kind of lectures, but please understand your answers become quite rich when you have much more detailed kind of discussion and information. So I hope this could be useful to you. The next topic of next lecture would be US-Israel-Iran war. I would discuss this in detail in next lecture. All right. So I would conclude this session here, right? And I'm reiterating this. You would get this detailed PDF. You can download it. You can study. And I have included some practice questions and answers in this PDF as well. Thank you.